Okay,
There you go.
we are live. It always feels like a little miracle when we press live and it works. So, welcome and hello to everyone or anyone who tunes in. We're trying these, what we're calling Wednesday Night Lives, in order to have a small conversation that is representative of our themes this year with young parents. And we would love to invite, if anybody does tune in, we're going to extend that invitation to participate in it by leaving a comment, which we hope to catch and answer. But I am here. My name is Laura Lee, and I am the Young Parents Director, and I'm here with Katie. Katie is our discipleship coordinator and has spiritual conversations with young parents and me and others in your role. So,
And myself.
And myself.
Hi.
That's important. So tonight we're continuing. Oh, I've done my fancy banners, so I don't want to miss doing those.
Look at you.
Yeah, I worked really hard on typing in Turning Point. But our theme this year is Turning Point, and it's really we've come up with this theme as a way of articulating the point in our journey, life's journey, where we may feel stuck, we may feel lost, but maybe there's something that points us in a new direction that ends up being beneficial for us. We can't always identify it as beneficial in the moment, but in hindsight, it is often there. But we're bringing it up because sometimes in that lostness or stuckness, somebody holds up a signpost for us. And that is something that we want to do for anyone, particularly young parents, in order to say, we have a way forward for you or a change in direction. Okay, so that's an intro for what we're talking about today. And I actually didn't put what our topic is, I don't think, this year. I didn't create a banner for that one. Anyway, it is moving from loneliness to connection. So to reiterate, Turning Point, our loneliness might be a place where we feel lost or stuck. And what do we do with this? So I, of course, have a question for you, Katie. And if anyone is tuning in, I have a question for you as well. Have you ever had a time where you felt lonely? And I'm going to presume that's a yes. But can you share, Katie, is there something that comes to mind for you?
Sure. I'm really curious to know if there's anybody who has ever not felt lonely. Because I highly doubt that that's a thing. For sure, I felt lonely like repeatedly over and over and over again. Big things that stand out are especially early in my mothering years. With little kids, sort of you're like with them all day, you're in the trenches doing all the messy stuff. And you might even, like for me, I was like trying to sort of, go to parks or mom groups or something like that. But I was always kind of focused on the kids and what's going on and not really feeling like I was making deep connections or deep friendships. So I think that was a big one. And that's gone through cycles, kind of depending on the stages of my kids, my own stages of what's going on, mental health stuff, like all of that has cycled in and out. But yeah, I mean, I can think of so many examples. I can think back like high school, like feeling like nobody knows me, that sort of stuff. Like,
okay,
I think it's just a cyclical thing in life.
So I want to pick up what you're saying, because those have been times where you've been around people.
Yeah, I think I'm always around, not always, but I generally am. I've never been totally alone, disconnected.
So loneliness doesn't mean you're alone necessarily, although it can be that. Loneliness can be felt when you're with other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So for anyone tuning in, you can see the question I put up. Have you ever felt lonely? Katie asked, has anyone ever not felt lonely? It feels very much part of the human condition. And I can certainly think about childhood moments. We moved several times as kids, moving from school to school to school. And I can remember having a sense of loneliness in that. I like you said, as a parent, just all consumed with baby or children and not feeling like I had a proper connection to others. So it's, if we believe that everybody has felt lonely, oh, well, how do we define it? How do we define loneliness? Maybe that's a good thing. If we talked about being alone, it's not necessarily being alone. It's sometimes and often felt among other people. How would you define it?
I think it has to do with feeling connected and, like I said before, feeling known by people. There's an intimacy with others that I think is needed to not feel lonely. I mean, we can keep ourselves busy, I think, even have lots of fun and good times with people, but we can, go home at the end of the day and think, well, I don't have anyone who I can share my troubles with or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think loneliness, this is our turning point, right? I feel like loneliness is the opposite of being deeply connected with someone else or with a community or whatever it may be.
Yes, I think there's another part to it too. So one is not being connected, but there's a sense of sadness.
The emotion that goes along with it. Yeah.
What's that emotion? Because you're feeling disconnected, and maybe some people like, I'd love to disconnect, but there's like this deep, I know where I feel it in my body. People may feel it different places, but that there is the emotion of sadness when you're feeling lonely, and it can be very depleting, discouraging, and fake. Which I think is important, because what do we tell ourselves in those moments when we're feeling lonely? So we'll put that out to you if anybody too wants to comment. We're asking big questions, and maybe it's hard to comment, but even to think about it for yourself. What do you tell, or what have you told yourself when you're feeling lonely?
I can think of not helpful things that I have told myself. Well, often it's the self-talk of, it can either be blaming, like there's something wrong with somebody else, or internalizing myself. So must be something wrong with me. I'm not X enough. I'm not Y enough, like whatever it may be. Sort of, I think we try to find a reason for it. So we dig through and figure out, okay, what's wrong? Because I think we naturally want to solve it. So we have to first identify what the problem is. And that's important, but it can often lead us in, I think, unhealthy places. I think it can be helpful too, to just examine, why do I feel lonely and how can I come out of it? But I know for me, there's all like you were saying, that sadness, sort of the pit of sadness. I'm all in my head. I'm not an emotions person, that. So I'll feel the sadness and be like, okay, what is, like, let's figure this out.
You go to the head. That's actually helpful, baby.
Maybe. Figure it out. Like, I'm uncomfortable. I don't like feeling things. So how do we get out of this? Well, I could blame myself. And that's often what I personally would lean
so
towards.
The blame isn't always outwards. Sometimes
no.
Yeah. Like, just to recap and reiterate and say yes to the fact that you could blame yourself. Maybe there's something wrong with me and that's why I'm lonely. You can blame others. I put in efforts and they're not with me. I can go to that place for sure. Like there's all these things. And so it's really important to ask not only why you're feeling lonely, but are the things you're telling yourself true?
Yeah.
Like, can you just be digging a deeper sad hole for yourself when you're feeling lonely? And so that kind of leads to, how do we contribute to our own loneliness? Any thoughts about that question?
Yeah, I know, even from my own experience. So I've done a lot of the, like, almost trying to justify my loneliness in a way that just has me sit in it. And then I'll further isolate myself. I can go into a lot of pretty negative self-talk about it. And then sometimes I can actually be the person who I'm thinking that I'm telling myself, oh, well, you're just not that interesting. And then I'll go, try to meet new people and I'll be like, well, you're not interesting. So you don't even have anything to say to them. And that happens. Like, it's like, oh, well, that's what I'm thinking about, instead of, why not just enjoy being with these people or whatever.
Right. The things we think will fix it.
Yeah.
can actually make us feel lonely in a way, right?
Yeah.
I know, like, it's such an uncomfortable feeling, and we are prone to distract ourselves or escape from those uncomfortable
Oh,
feelings
yeah.
and isolate ourselves in them, and that can just increase our loneliness. Yeah, we're not really we don't do ourselves favors sometimes when it comes to loneliness.
No. I think it's really easy now to try to solve it by entertaining ourselves, because we can very easily keep very busy. And I was thinking, like, of just how many people were so lonely in COVID. And in some ways, there wasn't much we could necessarily do about it fully. But I mean, I'm sure if we looked up the statistics of how much, streaming services went up, and like video gaming, and I'm not judging that at all. We were coping. But we just try to entertain ourselves out of the discomfort of being lonely sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You raise a great point too about COVID. There's a statistic actually, and this isn't a COVID statistic. It's a current statistic from Stats Canada that among youth aged 15 to 24, nearly 1 in 4, is 23%, said that they always or often felt lonely. And
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting like teary. It breaks my heart, because I feel like that is the age group that, like, you're trying to be yourself, like your own person, and maybe pull away from your family a little bit in healthy ways. Like, I think that's a
yeah,
healthy stage of life, but yet it's so hard to do. And it can be really lonely. Like, you don't even know yourself often at that age, I think. So, like, to expect that other people would know you it's hard. Yeah, that's a hard stage.
That's a hard stage. That's a difficult statistic. And that's like, as you said, everyone feels loneliness at some point. The trouble with that stat is that it's always or often. And so we're there. So what does that mean to feel lonely? Like, it's one thing to want to get rid of the emotion, but if we ask something of it, what is that loneliness telling us? And I sense that loneliness is an indication of our longing to belong. What we were talking about, where it was, we're with people but not connected, or the ways that we try and calm ourselves down or soothe ourselves in our loneliness. But there's something that we need to pay attention to. It's a good impulse to feel lonely, but how are we dealing with that? What are we doing with that? So I wondered if there is an invitation here. We've been talking about it. Why are we even talking about loneliness, other than we think that there is a turning point here for those who are feeling lonely? Particularly, we talked about youth. We're talking about parenting. That can be a very critical time to be feeling very lonely. And is this a place where you're stuck? Is this a place where you don't know where to turn? You feel lost? Is there a turning point for you? Well, this is an invitation. Perhaps God is inviting you into connection. So there is a verse. Did I have it here? Look, I'm so proud of myself. I did put this one in. This verse comes from Psalm 68, verse 6, and it says, God sets the lonely in families. I find that to be very hopeful, but you are our biblical scholar.
You're putting weight on me here.
I'm not wrong. I'm not lying. And I just could you explain to us, does that mean when we're feeling lonely and we pray and poof, we're in a beautiful, wonderful family and they've adopted us and everything is better? Because that's kind of what we want when that happens.
Yeah.
What does this actually mean from your point of view, Katie?
Well, I think there's a lot to it. I think that first, what's important for us to know in a really quick way is to know that we were created for community, to know that God, the story of creation is really one of God, and this is going to be like theology stuff that if you have questions about, let's talk, but God himself is a community of love. It's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and it's a community of love, and he creates humanity to be in community with each other and with him. and then that's broken. But the whole story of the Bible is this restoration, this mission of God's to restore our connection to him and to each other. And yet there's some of that is still present, some of that goodness that was originally created that is still here. And I think, especially when you look at the historical context of this is written in a time where to think of somebody living completely on their own is unheard of. People were in families, in multi-generational families, in tribal families that lived together. And again, we've said you can be around people and not be lonely. So this is not to say that people in that time weren't lonely, but just that God created those deep connections, those even biological connections. And I know that some people don't have that. And so there's also the surrogacy, and the Bible talks a lot about even our own adoption into the family of God. And so I think that this speaks in its own context to really just almost like a tribal connection that God gives us one another to support each other and to have intimacy and to be known by one another. But then in our own context that God really does want us to be connected, whether it's with your biological family or with others. And he's part of that. I think there's an active part where God is the one doing this because he wants us to be connected to others. And he wants you to know him and to be known by you as well. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's really, I'm so encouraged by that and the idea that God, we just make him so out there and so distant, but he is so close in this statement that he cares about your loneliness. Like I can't get over that. And I hope there's moments where, and I know it's been true for me, that when I have been lonely and I reached out to him, I had a sense of his care for me, even if it wasn't resolved in the moment. I'm truly not alone when I'm with the Lord, and he is always with me. And it's about me actually receiving that for myself. So I know, do you have something to add?
I was just going to say, I think that longing, like you were saying, is a sign, obviously, for longing for connection with others, but is also just a sign of our longing to be in connection with God and to know that we're known and to feel that closeness that you were talking about. I was thinking about this today, that one of the things, I mean, if we think about like evolutionary biology, nobody has evolved in such a way that they can fully be 100% independent and not need connection. And you would think if we're going to be the strongest, like most resilient human, that we wouldn't actually need others because other people are challenging and bring us down. But it's so ingrained in us to need. This is how we were created by a God of love and of community, that we can't move beyond that. We just need it so desperately. It's our deepest need, I think, to be known by him and to know him.
Yeah. And so if we are wired for connection, when we're not having it, that's an alarm bell, the loneliness feeling. And so there is a turning point here for us to move into connection. Our time is up. We are always going to extend to you, young moms, young dads, an invitation for you to continue this conversation, whether it's at group, which we have across the GTA, whether it's joining us on Wednesday Night Lives, or whether it's joining us in mentorship, one-to-one conversations. You don't have to, say that you believe everything. It can just be sorting through what you're trying to work through spiritually. And from a faith perspective, we would love to have those conversations with you. Before we close, anything to add, Katie?
I don't think so. Just adding to what you were just saying, even commenting if you're watching this later, we can respond, or even dialogue there if it's something that can happen online. And however.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. And thank you, Katie. I appreciate it. Is that you in the background?
Yeah, you're probably hearing kids now. They're starting to So just keep quiet for like 20 minutes. They almost
Want
made
to
it.
connect with your kids.
Yeah.
What a great segue. Okay, well, we'll see you next time. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Bye.
Bye.